Good evening, everybody. Hello, hello. Happy New Year. Hello, Brittany. Hello, Sue. I hope you all have had a great day so far. Michelle, Sandra, hello, everyone. Happy New Year to you all. Sally, hi. I'm so glad that you all could join me this evening for our first book read of 2025. I'm so glad that you guys were able to make it. For any of you, Zelda, Gabby, Karen, hello everyone. Hi. For those of you who may not know, if you're just kind of scrolling through TikTok, hi, I am Mimi. You have stumbled upon a book reading for this evening. And normally when I do these book readings, I usually have like the book itself like in the background as like my background screen, but I wanted it to be a super secret surprise for you guys to start off the new year. So I'm gonna give it about another like few minutes before I reveal what book we're going to be reading today, or at least start reading today anyway. I'm so excited. I can't wait to share this book with you guys. I'm kind of geeking out just a little bit right now, but I am so happy to see you all here. I am so excited to start off this new year. Hopefully 2025, you know, it's nicer to us than maybe 2024 was last year, but you know, all we can do is just take one day at a time and just kind of stick together and just keep on breathing, keep on moving, and you know, stay hydrated, of course. And normally I don't do book readings with like a full face of makeup on. Usually I'm in my pajamas and my hair's wet or something, like, because I'm chilling for the evening. I'm ready to call it in for the night when I'm done reading with you guys. But I got sidetracked making some new Nikki content. So if you don't know me, so I do book readings, but my main content is actually a character called Nikki Nixchild, who works in the afterlife realm in the Infernal Department, specifically the Infernal Appeals Office. And so if you guys have not seen that content of mine, please go check it out, give it some love. I have made a video about this already, regarding the potential TikTok ban. If the TikTok ban actually happens, I'm going to try a few different things before I disappear from the app altogether. I'm considering doing the Lemonade thing, so I would still be on TikTok, but TikTok Lite, I guess, is what it is. So that way I technically don't have to go anywhere, which would be great. I'm gonna try some of the workarounds, the other workarounds for the ban, that may mess up my algorithm. I have no idea, but again, I'm gonna try and do everything I can to not completely disappear from this app, because I don't want to miss out on you guys. I don't want you all missing out like on these book readings and on my content. Yes, they're going to be over on my YouTube channel. Actually, all of my content, the Nikki videos and the book readings are already on my YouTube channel. So if you are not a subscriber, I would appreciate a subscription. Like, sign up. Follow me, ring the bells, do the thumbs up, the clicks, the likes, all the things. Because that will be my alternative. If I disappear from TikTok, that will be you'll find me for sure on YouTube. So, what time is it? 8:03? Okay, all right. I'm gonna go ahead and I am going to reveal what book we're gonna be reading from. For, I don't know, it's a big book, so it's probably going to take us a few weeks to get through it. But We will be reading from Wicked! Yes! I'm so excited! We will be reading from Wicked. Actually, I had a little bit of a hint because I'm wearing green and like there's some kind of pink like in the stripes here, so like I'm wearing a little bit of a hint. But anyway, yes, we'll be reading from Wicked. Now, with that being said, I took some notes because I wanted to make sure I got this right. So for anyone who does not know this already, Wicked, the movie, is just the first part, the first half of the Broadway show, Wicked. The Broadway show is based off of a book series by Gregory Maguire. Okay? Gregory Maguire did basically like world building for the Wizard of Oz. There's like four books that he wrote after the original Wizard of Oz series of books was written. And those books were written by L. Frank Baum. So for anyone who, fun little fact, Elphaba, her name is inspired by L. Frank Baum. Elphaba. I thought that was cool. So if you haven't seen the movie, if you haven't seen the Broadway show, if you haven't read the books, there's going to be spoilers, okay? I just need to get that out of the way now. There's going to be spoilers. I will try my best. I will make that a frequent reminder. If you don't want to be spoiled about what is in here, if you want to watch the movies, because the second movie, they're going to make, so the second movie that's going to come out, I've heard rumors that it's going to potentially deviate a little bit from this book, the second half of this book, basically. I don't know if that's true. I don't know if it's just rumor mill stuff, but I wanted to just let you know that at least for the first half, potentially, of this story, there's going to be some spoilers if you haven't seen any of it yet. So if you are, oh, thank you, Dolly. Thank you so much. So if you don't want anything spoiled, I can't believe I'm going to say this, but don't watch this live. Don't listen to any of these book readings. Just skip this one if you don't want any spoilers. With that said, we're going to start reading. But just, I always like to double check. I'm sure you can, but give me like thumbs up, give me hearts, give me some indication that you can hear me well. Not kinda, but like, can you hear me fine? I think you can, but I always like to double check just to make sure before I start reading. And if you're new to the book readings, I try and go for about an hour. Sometimes it's an hour and 15. Sometimes there was one time I did a 2-hour reading. It was toward the end of the book. That was a very, very long read. So sometimes it's a little bit less than an hour. Sometimes it's a little bit more. But we'll typically read for about an hour until we come to a nice stopping point in any story that I'm reading. So just you know, just to let you know, that's kind of how we do things. So, all right. I'm assuming you guys can hear me fine. All right, so here we go, guys. Oh, just real quick. The 4 books that Gregory Maguire has written is Wicked. That's the first one. And then the second one is Son of a Witch. The third one is A Lion Among Men. And the fourth one is Out of Oz. So he has done a whole 4-part book series world building on the Wizard of Oz. Basically, he has expanded on the original L. Frank Baum story. And even L. Frank Baum wrote several different, like, shorter stories about Oz and the characters in it. So, but yeah. Here we go. Oh my god, I'm so excited. Okay. Prologue. On the yellow brick road. A mile above Oz, the witch balanced on the wind's forward edge, as if she were a green fleck of the land itself, flung up and sent wheeling away by the turbulent air. White and purple summer thunderheads mounded around her. Below, the yellow brick road looped back on itself like a relaxed noose. The winter storms and the crowbars of agitators had torn up the road. It still led, relentlessly, to the Emerald City. The witch could see the companions trudging along, maneuvering around the buckled sections, skirting trenches, skipping when the way was cleared. They seemed oblivious of their fate, but it was not up to the witch to enlighten them. She used the broom as a sort of balustrade, stepping down from the sky like one of her flying monkeys. She finished up on the topmost bough of a black willow tree. Beneath, hidden by the fronds, her prey had paused to take their rest. The witch tucked her broom under her arm. Crab-like and quiet, she scuttled down a little at a time until she was a mere 20 feet above them. The wind moved the dangling tendrils of the tree. The witch stared and listened. There were 4 of them. She could see a huge cat of some sort. A lion, was it? And a shiny woodman. The Tin Woodman was picking nits out of the lion's mane, and the lion was muttering and squirming from the aggravation. An animated scarecrow lolled nearby, blowing dandelion heads into the wind. The girl was out of sight behind shifting curtains of the willow. Of course, to hear them tell it, it is the surviving sister who is the crazy one, said the lion. What a witch! Psychologically warped, possessed by demons. Insane. Not a pretty picture. She was castrated at birth, replied the Tin Woodman calmly. She was born hermaphroditic, or maybe entirely male. Oh, you see castration everywhere you look, said the lion. I'm only repeating what folks say, said the Tin Woodman. Everyone is entitled to an opinion, said the lion airily. She was deprived of a mother's love, is how I've heard it. She was an abused child. She was addicted to medicine for her skin condition. She has been unlucky in love, said the Tin Woodman, like the rest of us. The Tin Woodman paused and placed a hand on the center of his chest, as if in grief. She's a woman who prefers the company of other women, said the Scarecrow, sitting up. She's the spurned lover of a married man. She is a married man. The witch was so stunned that she nearly lost her grip on the branch. The last thing she ever cared for was gossip, yet she had been out of touch for so long that she was astounded at the vigorous opinions of these random nobodies. She's a despot, a dangerous tyrant, said the lion with conviction. The Tin Woodman pulled harder than was necessary on a lock of mane. Everything's dangerous to you, you craven thing. I hear she's a champion of home rule for the so-called Winkies. Whoever she is, she must surely be grieving the death of her sister, said the child, in a somber voice too rich, too sincere for one so young. The witch's skin crawled. Don't go feeling sympathetic now. I certainly can't, the Tin Woodman sniffed, a bit cynically. But Dorothy is right, said the Scarecrow. No one is exempt from grief. The witch was deeply irked by their patronizing speculations. She moved around the trunk of the tree, stretching to catch a glimpse of the child. The wind was picking up, and the Scarecrow shivered. While the Tin Woodman continued fussing over the lion's tresses, he leaned against the lion, who held him tenderly. Storm on the horizon, said the Scarecrow. Miles off, thunder echoed. There is a witch on the horizon, said the Tin Woodman, tickling the lion. The lion got spooked and rolled on top of the Scarecrow, whimpering, and the Tin Woodman collapsed on top of them both. Good friends, should we be wary of that storm? Said the girl. The rising winds moved the curtain of greenery at last, and the witch caught sight of the girl. She was sitting with her feet tucked underneath her and her arms wrapped around her knees. She was not a dainty thing, but a good-sized farm girl, dressed in blue and white checks and a pinafore. In her lap, a vile little dog cowered and whined. The storm makes you skittish. It's natural after what you've been through, said the Tin Woodman. Relax. The witch's fingers dug into the bark of the tree. She still could not see the girl's face, just her strong forearms and the crown of her head where her dark hair was pulled back into pigtails. Was she to be taken seriously? Or was she merely a blown-away dandelion seed, caught on the wrong side of the wind? If she could see the girl's face, the witch felt she might know. But as the witch craned outward from the trunk, the girl at the same time twisted her face, turning away. The storm is coming closer, and in a hurry. The feeling in her voice rose as the wind rose. She had a throaty vehemence, like someone arguing through the threat of impending tears. I know storms. I know how they come upon you. We're safer here, said the Tin Woodman. Certainly we are not, answered the girl, because this tree is the highest point around, and if lightning is to strike, it will strike here. She clutched her dog. Didn't we see a shed farther up the road? Come, come, Scarecrow, if there's lightning, you'll burn the fastest. Come on. She was up and running in an ungainly way, and her companions followed in a mounting panic. As the first hard drops of rain fell, the witch caught sight, not of the girl's face, but of the shoes. Her sister's shoes. They sparkled even in the darkening afternoon. They sparkled like yellow diamonds, and embers of blood, and thorny stars. If she had seen the shoes first, the witch would never have been able to listen to the girl or her friends. But the girl's legs had been tucked beneath her skirt. Now the witch was reminded of her need. The shoes should be hers. Hadn't she endured enough? Hadn't she earned them? The witch would fall on the girl from the sky and wrestle those shoes off her impertinent feet. If only she could. But the storm from which the companions raced, farther and faster along the yellow brick road, troubled the witch more than it did the girl who had gone through rain and the Scarecrow whom lightning could burn. The witch could not venture out in such a vicious, insinuating wetness. Instead, she had to tuck herself between some exposed roots of the black willow tree, where no water could endanger her, and wait for the storm to pass. She would emerge. She always had before. The punishing political climate of Oz had beat her down, dried her up, tossed her away. Like a seedling she had drifted, apparently too desiccated ever to take root. But surely the curse was on the land of Oz, not on her. Though Oz had given her a twisted life, hadn't it also made her capable? No matter that the companions had hurried away, the witch could wait. They would meet again. Chapter 1. Munchkinlanders. The Root of Evil. From the crumpled bed, the wife said, I think today's the day. Look how low I've gone. Today? That would be like you, perverse and inconvenient, said her husband, teasing her, standing at the doorway and looking outward over the lake, the fields, the forested slopes beyond. He could just make out the chimneys of rush margins, breakfast fires smoking. The worst possible moment for my ministry, naturally. The wife yawned. There's not a lot of choice involved, from what I hear. Your body gets this big, and it takes over. If you can't accommodate it, sweetheart, you just get out of its way. It's on a track of its own, and nothing stops it now. She pushed herself up, trying to see over the rise of her belly. I feel like a hostage to myself, or to the baby. Exert some self-control. He came to her side and helped her sit up. Think of it as a spiritual exercise, custody of the senses, bodily as well as ethical continence. Self-control? She laughed, inching toward the edge of the bed. I have no self left. I'm only a host for the parasite. Where's my self, anyway? Where'd I leave that tired old thing? Think of me. His tone had changed. He meant this. Frex, she headed him off. When the volcano's ready, there's no priest in the world that can pray it quiet. What will my fellow ministers think? They'll get together and say, Brother Fexbar, did you allow your wife to deliver your first child when you had a community problem to solve? How inconsiderate of you. It shows a lack of authority. You're fired from the position. She was ribbing him now, for there was no one to fire him. The nearest bishop was too distant to pay attention to the particulars of a unionist cleric in the hinterland. It's such terrible timing. I do think you bear half the blame for the timing, she said. I mean, after all, Frex. That's how the thinking goes, but I wonder. You wonder? She laughed, her head going far back. The line from her ear to the hollow of her throat reminded Frex of an elegant silver ladle. Even in morning disarray, with a belly like a scow, she was majestically good-looking. Her hair had the bright, lacquered look of wet fallen oak leaves in sunlight. He blamed her for being born to privilege and admired her efforts to overcome it. And all the while, he loved her too. You mean you wonder if you're the father? She grabbed the bedstead. Frex took hold of one of her other arms and hauled her half upright. Or do you question the fatherliness of men in general? She stood, mammoth, an ambulatory island. Moving out the door at a slug's pace, she laughed at such an idea. He could hear her laughing from the outhouse even as he began to dress for the day's battle. Frex combed his beard and oiled his scalp. He fastened a clasp of bone and rawhide at the nape of his neck to keep the hair out of his face, because his expressions today had to be readable from a distance. There could be no fuzziness to his meaning. He applied some coal dust to darken his eyebrows, a smear of red wax on his flat cheeks. He shaded his lips. A handsome priest attracted more penitents than a homely one. In the kitchen yard, Melina floated gently, not with the normal gravity of pregnancy, but as if inflated, a huge balloon trailing its strings through the dirt. She carried a skillet in one hand and a few eggs and the whiskery tips of autumn chives in the other. She sang to herself, but only in short phrases. Frex wasn't meant to hear her. His sober gown buttoned tight to the collar, his sandals strapped over leggings, Frex took from its hiding place, beneath a chest of drawers, the report sent to him from his fellow minister over in the village of 3 dead trees. He hid the brown pages within his sash. He had been keeping them from his wife, afraid that she would want to come along, to see the fun, if it was amusing, or to suffer the thrill of it, if it was terrifying. As Frex breathed deeply, readying his lungs for a day of oratory, Melina dangled a wooden spoon in the skillet and stirred the eggs. The tinkle of cowbells sounded across the lake. She did not listen, or she listened but to something else, to something inside her. It was sound without melody, like dream music, remembered for its effect but not for its harmonic distresses and recoveries. She imagined it was the child inside her, humming for happiness. She knew he would be a singing child. Melina heard Frex inside, beginning to extemporize, warming up, calling forth the rolling phrases of his argument, convincing himself again of his righteousness. How did that proverb go? The one that Nanny sing-songed to her years ago in the nursery? Born in the morning, woe without warning, afternoon child, woeful and wild. Born in the evening, woe ends in grieving. Night baby borning, same as the morning. But she remembered this as a joke, fondly. Woe is the natural end of life, yet we go on having babies. No, said Nanny, an echo in Melina's mind, and editorializing as usual. No, you pretty little pampered hussy. We don't go on having babies, that's quite apparent. We only have babies when we're young enough not to know how grim life turns out. Once we really get the full measure of it. We're slow learners, we women. We dry up in disgust and sensibly halt production. But men don't dry up, Melina objected. They can father to the death. Ah, we're slow learners, Nanny countered. But they can't learn at all. Breakfast, said Melina, spooning eggs into a wooden plate. Her son would not be as dull as most men. She would raise him up to defy the onward progress of woe. It is a time of crisis for our society, recited Rex. For a man who condemned worldly pleasures, he ate with elegance. She loved to watch the arabesque of fingers and 2 forks. She suspected that beneath his righteous asceticism, he possessed a hidden longing for the easy life. Every day is a great crisis for our society. She was being flip, answering him in terms men use. Dear thick thing, he didn't hear the irony in her voice. We stand at a crossroads. Idolatry looms. Traditional values in jeopardy. Truth under siege and virtue abandoned. He wasn't talking to her so much as practicing his tirade against the coming spectacle of violence and magic. There was a side to Frex that verged on despair. Unlike most men, he was able to channel it to befit his life's work. With some difficulty, she set herself down on a bench. Whole choruses were singing wordlessly inside her head. Was this common for every labor and delivery? She would have liked to ask the nosy local women who would come around this afternoon, growling shyly at her condition, but she didn't dare. She couldn't jettison her pretty accent, which they found affected, but she could avoid sounding ignorant about these basic matters. Frex noticed her silence. "You're not angry I'm leaving you today?" Angry? She raised her eyebrows as if she had never encountered the concept before. "History crawls along on the peg legs of small individual lives," said Frex. At the same time, larger eternal forces converge. You can't attend to both arenas at once. Our child may not have a small life. Now isn't the time to argue. Do you want to distract me from holy work today? We're facing the presence of real evil in Rush Margins. I couldn't live with myself if I ignored it. He meant this, and for such intensity she had fallen in love with him. But she hated him for it too, of course. Threats come. They'll come again. Her last word on the subject. Your son will only be born once, and if this watery upheaval inside is any indication, I think it's today. There will be other children. She turned away so he could not see the rage in her face. But she couldn't sustain the fury at him. Perhaps this was her moral failing. She wasn't much given to worrying about moral failings as a rule. Having a minister as a husband seemed to stir enough religious thought for one couple. She lapsed sullenly into silence. Frex nibbled at his meal. "It's the devil," said Frex, sighing. "The devil is coming." "Don't say a thing like that on a day our child is expected." "I mean the temptation in Rush Margins. And you know what I mean, Melina." "Words are words, and what's said is said," she answered. "I don't require all your attention, Frex, but I do need some of it." She dropped the skillet with a crash on the bench that stood against the cottage wall. "Well, and likewise," he said. "What do you think I'm up against today? How can I convince my flock to turn away from the razzle-dazzle spectacle of idolatry? I will probably come back tonight having lost to a smarter attraction. You might achieve a child today. I look forward to failure." Still, as he said this, he looked proud. To fail in the cause of a high moral concern was satisfying to him. How could it compare with the flesh, blood, mess, and noise of having a baby? He stood at last to leave. A wind came up over the lake now, smudging the topmost reaches of the columns of kitchen smoke. They looked, thought Melina, like funnels of water swirling down drains in narrowing, focusing spirals. "Be well, my love," said Frex, although he had his stern public expression on, from forehead to toes. "Yes," Melina sighed. The child punched her, deep down, and she had to hurry to the outhouse again. "Be holy, and I'll be thinking of you, my backbone, my breastplate, and also try not to be killed." "The will of the unnamed God," said Frex. "My will, too," she said blasphemously. "Apply your will to that which deserves it," he answered. Now he was the minister and she the sinner, an arrangement she did not particularly enjoy. "Goodbye," she said, and chose the stinkant relief of the outhouse over standing to wave him out of sight as he strode along the road to Rush Margins. Hello to anybody who has joined us for our reading. We are reading from Wicked, in case you didn't know. And all the spoiler alerts, if you have not seen any of the other media that has to do with this story, I don't know what to tell you, except there will be spoilers for you if you haven't seen the movie, if you haven't seen the Broadway show, if you haven't read the original books by L. Frank Baum, or by Gregory Maguire, because he's got a 4-part series to this book. There's going to be spoilers. So I will be saying that frequently because I really, really want everyone to know that there's going to be spoilers. Absolutely. So, The Clock of the Time Dragon. Frex was more concerned for Melina than she knew. He stopped at the first fisherman's hut he saw and spoke with the man at the half-door. Could a woman or two spend the day, and if needed the night, with Melina? It would be a kindness. Frex nodded with a wince of gratitude, acknowledging without words that Melina was not a great favorite in these parts. Then, before continuing around the end of Ill's Water and over to Rush Margins, he stopped at a fallen tree and drew 2 letters from his sash. The writer was a distant cousin of Frex's, also a minister. Weeks earlier, the cousin had spent time and valuable ink on a description of what was being called the Clock of the Time Dragon. Frex prepared himself for the day's holy campaign by rereading about the idle clock. I write in haste, brother Frexbar, to catch my impressions before they fade. The clock of the Time Dragon is mounted on a wagon and stands as high as a giraffe. It is nothing more than a tottering, free-standing theater, punched on all 4 sides with alcoves and proscenium arches. On the flat roof is a clockwork dragon, an invention of green painted leather, silvery claws, ruby jeweled eyes. Its skin is made of, hundreds of overlapping discs of copper, bronze, and iron. Beneath the flexible folds of its scales is an armature controlled by clockwork. The Time Dragon circles on its pedestal, flexes its narrow leathery wings. They make a sound like a bellows, and belches out sulphurous balls of flaming orange stink. Below, featured in the dozens of doorways, windows, and porches, are puppets, marionettes, figurines, creatures of folktale, caricatures of peasants and royalty alike, animals and fairies and saints, our unionist saints, brother Frexbar, stolen out from beneath us. I get enraged. The figures move on sprockets. They wheel in and out of doorways. They bend at the waist. They dance and dawdle and dally with each other. Who had engendered this time dragon, this fake oracle, this propaganda tool for wickedness that challenged the power of unionism and of the unnamed god? The clock's handlers were a dwarf and some narrow-waisted minions who seemed to have only had enough brain capacity among them to pass a hat. Who else was benefiting besides the dwarf and his beauty boys? The cousin's second letter had warned that the clock was making its way next to Rush Margins. It had told a more specific story. The entertainment began with a thrum of strings and a rattle of bones. The crowd pushed close, oohing. Within the lighted window of a stage, we saw a marriage bed with a puppet wife and husband. The husband was asleep and the wife sighed. She made a motion with her carved hands to suggest that her husband was disappointingly small. The audience shrieked with laughter. The puppet wife went to sleep herself. When she was snoring, the puppet husband sneaked out of bed. At this point, up above, the dragon turned on its base and pointed its talons into the crowd, indicating, without a doubt, a humble well-digger named Grine, who has been a faithful if inattentive husband. Then the dragon reared back and stretched 2 fingers in a come-hither gesture, isolating a widow named Letta and her snaggle-toothed maiden daughter. The crowd hushed and fell away from Grine, Letta, and the blushing maid, as if they had suddenly been inflicted with running sores. The dragon rested again, but draped a wing over another archway, which lit up to reveal the puppet husband, wandering out in the night. Along came a puppet widow, with sprigged hair and high color, dragging along a protesting, flinty-toothed daughter. The widow kissed the puppet husband and pulled off his leather trousers. He was equipped with 2 full sets of male goods, one in front of another hanging off the base of his spine. The widow positioned her daughter on the abbreviated prong in the front, and herself took advantage of the more menacing arrangement in the rear. The 3 puppets bucked and rocked, emitting squeals of glee. When the puppet widow and her daughter were through, they dismounted and kissed the adulterous puppet husband. Then they kneed him simultaneously, fore and aft. He swung on springs and hinges, trying to hold all his wounded parts. The audience roared. Grine, the actual well-digger, sweated drops as big as grapes. Letta pretended to guffaw, but her daughter had already disappeared from shame. Before the evening was out, Grine was set upon by his agitated neighbors and investigated for the grotesque anomaly. Letta was shunned. Her daughter seems to have vanished entirely. We suspect the worst. At least Grine wasn't killed. Yet, who can say how our souls have been stamped by witnessing such a cruel drama? All souls are hostages to their human envelopes, but souls must decay and suffer at such indignity. Don't you agree? Sometimes it seemed to Frex that every itinerant witch and toothless, gibbering seer in Oz who could perform even the most transparent of spells had seized on the outback district of Wend Hardings to scratch out a trade. He knew that folks from Rush Margins were humble, their lives were hard, and their hopes few. As the drought dragged on, their traditional Unionist faith was eroding. Frex was aware that the clock of the Time Dragon combined the appeals of ingenuity and magic, and he would have to call upon his deepest reserves of religious conviction to overcome it. If his congregation should prove vulnerable to the so-called pleasure faith, succumbing to spectacle and violence, well, what next? He would prevail. He was their minister. He had pulled their teeth and buried their babies and blessed their kitchen pots for years now. He had abased himself in their names. He had wandered within an unkept beard and a begging bowl from hamlet to hamlet, leaving poor Melina alone in the minister's lodge for weeks at a time. He had sacrificed for them. They couldn't be swayed by this time dragon creature. They owed him. He moved on, shoulders square, jaw set, stomach in a sour uproar. The sky was brown with flying sand and grit. The wind rushed high over the hills with the sound of a tremulous wail, as if pushing through some fissure of rock on a ridge beyond any Frex could see. Hello, everyone. Hello. Thank you for all the likes, everyone. I greatly appreciate it. Thank you. The Birth of a Witch. It was nearly evening by the time Frex had worked up the courage to enter the ramshackle hamlet of Rush Margins. He was in a deep sweat. He hit his heels to the ground and pumped his clenched fists and called out in a hoarse, carrying tone, "Hist! O ye of small confidence, gather while ye may, for temptation is abroad, to try ye sorely." The words were archaic, even ridiculous, but they worked. Here came the sullen fishermen, dragging their empty nets up from the dock. Here came the subsistence farmers, whose hard-scrabble plots had borne little during this dry year. Before he had even begun, they all looked guilty as sin. They followed him to the rickety steps of the canoe repair house. Frex knew that everyone expected this evil clock to arrive at any instant. Gossip was as contagious as the plague. He yelled at them for their thirsty anticipation. "Ye are dull as toddlers reaching their hands to touch the pretty embers. Ye are as if spawn of dragon womb, ready to suck on teats of fire." These were time-worn scriptural imprecations, and they fell a little flat tonight. He was tired, and not at his best. "Brother Frexbar," said Fee, the mayor of Rush Margins, "could you perhaps tone down your harangue until we get a chance to see what fresh new form temptation might take?" "You have no mettle to resist new forms," said Frex, spitting. "Haven't you been our able teacher these several years?" said Fee. "We've hardly had such a good chance to prove ourselves against sin. We're looking forward to the spiritual test of it all." The fisherman laughed and jeered, and Frex intensified his glower. But at the sound of unfamiliar wheels in the stony ruts of the road, they all turned their heads and fell silent. He had lost their attention before he had gotten started. The clock was being drawn by 4 horses and escorted by the dwarf and his cohort of young thugs. Its broad roof was crowned by the dragon. But what a beast! It looked poised as if ready to spring, as if indeed invested with life. The skin of the house was decorated in carnival colors, burnished with gold leaf. The fisherman gaped as it drew near. Before the dwarf could announce the time of the performance, before the crowd of youths could draw out their clubs, Frex leaped on the lower step of the thing, a fold-down stage on hinges. Why is this thing called a clock? The only clock face it has is flat, dull, and lost in all that distracting detail. Furthermore, the hands don't move. Look, see for yourselves. They're painted to remain at 1 minute before midnight. And you'll see here is mechanics, my friends. I know this for a fact. You'll see mechanical cornfields growing, moons waxing and waning, a volcano to spew a soft red cloth done up with black and red sequins. With all this TikToky business, why not have a pair of circulating arms on the clock face? Why not? I ask you, I'm asking you, yes, you, Garnett, and you, Stoy, and you, Peripa. Why no real clock here? They were not listening. Garnett and Stoy and Peripa, nor were the others. They were too busy staring in anticipation. The answer, of course, is that the clock isn't meant to measure earthly time, but the time of the soul, redemption and condemnation time. For the soul, each instant is always a minute short of judgment. 1 minute short of judgment, my friends. If you died in the next 60 seconds, would you want to spend eternity in the suffocating depths reserved for idolaters? Awful lot of noise in the neighborhood tonight, said someone in the shadows, and the spectators laughed. Above Frex, he whirled to see. From a little door had emerged a small, yapping puppet dog. Its hair dark, and as tightly curled as Frex's own. The dog bounced on a spring, and the pitch of its chatter was annoyingly high. The laughter grew. Evening fell harder, and it was less easy for Frex to tell who was laughing, who now was shouting for him to move aside so they could see. He wouldn't move, so he was bundled unceremoniously from his perch. The dwarf gave a poetic welcome. All our lives are activity without meaning. We burrow rat-like into life, and we squirm rat-like through it, and rat-like we are flung into our graves at the end. Now and then, why shouldn't we hear a voice of prophecy, or see a miracle play? Beneath the apparent sham and indignity of our rat-like lives, a humble pattern and meaning still applies. Come nearer, my good people, and watch what a little extra knowledge augurs for your lives. The time dragon sees before and beyond and within the truth of your sorry span of years here. Look at what it shows you. The crowd pushed forward. The moon had risen, its light like the eye of an angry, vengeful god. Give over. Let me go, Frex called. It was worse than he had thought. He had never been manhandled by his own congregation. The clock unfolded a story about a publicly pious man, with lamb's wool beard and dark curly locks, who preached simplicity, poverty, and generosity while keeping a hidden coffer of gold and emeralds in the double-hinged bosom of a weak-chinned daughter of blue blood society. The scoundrel was run through with a long iron stake in a most indelicate way, and served up to his hungry flock as roast flank of minister. This panders to your basest instincts, Frex yelled, his arms folded and his face magenta with fury. But now that darkness was almost total, someone came up from behind him to silence him. An arm encircled his neck. He twisted to see which damned parishioner took such liberties, but all the faces were cloaked by hoods. He was kneed in the groin and doubled over, his face in the dirt. A foot kicked him square between the buttocks, and his bowels released. The rest of the crowd, however, was not watching. They were howling with mirth at some other entertainment put on by the clock dragon. A sympathetic woman in a widow's shawl grabbed his arm and led him away. He was too fouled, too much in pain to straighten up and see who it was. I'll put you down in the root cellar, I will, under a burlap, crooned the good wife, for they'll be after you tonight with pitchforks, the way that thing is behaving itself. They'll look for you in your lodge, but they won't look in my keeping room. Melina, he croaked, they'll find her. She'll be seen to, said his neighbor. We women can manage that much, I guess. In the minister's lodge, Melina struggled with consciousness as a pair of midwives. Consciousness as a pair of midwives went in and out of focus before her. One was a fishwife, the other a palazed crone. They took turns feeling her forehead, peering between her legs, and stealing glances at the few beautiful trinkets and treasures Melina had managed to bring here from Colwyn grounds. You chew that paste of pinlobble leaves, ducky. You do that. You'll be unconscious before you know it, said the fishwife. You'll relax. Out will pop the little sweetheart, and all will be well in the morning. Thought you would smell of rose water and fairy dew, but you stink like the rest of us. Chew on, my ducky, chew on. At the sound of a knock, the crone looked up guiltily from the chest she was kneeling before and rummaging through. She let the lid close with a bang and affected a position of prayer, eyes closed. "Enter," she called. A maiden with tender skin and high color came in. "Oh, I hoped someone would be here," she said. "How is she?" "Nearly out, and so is the babe," answered the fishwife. "An hour more, I reckon." "Well, I'm told to warn you. The men are drunk and on the prowl. They've been riled up by that dragon of the magic clock, you know, and they are looking for Frex to kill him. The clock said to. They'll likely stagger out here. We better get the wife safely away. Can she be moved?" "No, I cannot be moved," thought Melina. "And if the peasants find Frex, tell them to kill him good and hard for me, for I never knew a pain so extraordinary that it made me see the blood behind my own eyes. Kill him for doing this to me." At this thought she smiled in a moment of relief and passed out. "Let's leave her here and run for it," said the maiden. "The clock said to kill her too, and the little dragons she's going to give birth to. I don't want to get caught." "We've got our own reputations to uphold," said the fishwife. "We can't abandon the fancy lady thing in mid-delivery. I don't care what any clock says." The crone, her head back in the chest, said, "Anyone for some real lace from Gillikin?" "There's a hay cart in the lower field, but let's do it now," said the fishwife. "Come, help me fetch it. You, old mother hag, get your face out of the linens and come dampen this pretty pink brow. Right-o. Now we go." A few minutes later the crone, the wife, and the maiden were trundling the hay cart along a rarely used track through the spindles and bracken of the autumn woods. The wind had picked up. It whistled over the treeless foreheads of the cloth hills. Melina, sprawled in blankets, heaved and moaned in unconscious pain. They heard a drunken mob pass with pitchforks and torches, and the women stood silent and terrified, listening to the slurred curses. Then they pressed on with greater urgency until they came upon a foggy copse, the edge of the graveyard for unconsecrated corpses. Within it they saw the blurred outlines of the clock. It had been left here for safekeeping by the dwarf. No fool he. He could guess this particular corner of the world was the last place jumpy villagers would seek tonight. "The dwarf and his boykins were drinking in the tavern too," said the maiden breathlessly. "There's no one here to stop us." The crone said, "So you've been peering in the tavern windows at the men, you slut?" She pushed open the door in the back of the clock. She found a crawl space. Pendulums hung ominously in the gloom. Huge toothed wheels looked primed to slice any trespasser into sausage rounds. "Come on, drag her in," said the crone. The night of torches and fog gave way, at dawn, to broad bluffs of thundercloud, dancing skeletons of lightning. Glimpses of blue sky appeared briefly, though sometimes it rained so hard that it seemed more like mud drops falling than water. The midwives, crawling on hands and knees out of the back of the clock wagon, had their little discharge at last. They protected the infant from the dripping gutter. "Look, a rainbow," said the senior, bobbing her head. A sickly scarf of colored light hung in the sky. What they saw, rubbing the caul and blood off the skin, was it just a trick of the light? After all, following the storm, the grass did seem to throb with its own color. The roses zinged and hovered with crazy glory on their stems. But even with these effects of light and atmosphere, the midwives couldn't deny what they saw. Beneath the spit of the mother's fluids, the infant glistened a scandalous shade of pale emerald. There was no wail, no bark of newborn outrage. The child opened its mouth, breathed, and then kept its own counsel. "Whine, you fiend," said the crone. "It's your job." The baby shirked its obligations. "Another willful boy," said the fishwife, sighing. "Shall we kill it?" "Don't be so hasty to it," said the crone. "It's a girl." "Ha!" said the bleary-eyed maiden. "Look again. There's the weather vane." For a minute they were in disagreement, even with the child naked before them. Only after a second and third rub was it clear that the child was indeed feminine. Perhaps in labor some bit of organic effluvia had become caught and quickly dried in the cloven place. Once toweled, she was observed to be prettily formed, with a long, elegant head, 4 arms nicely turned out, clever pinching little buttocks, cunning fingers with scratchy little nails. and an undeniable green cast to the skin. There was a salmon blush in the cheeks and belly, a beige effect around the clenched eyelids, a tawny stripe on the scalp showing the pattern of eventual hair, but the primary effect was vegetable. "Look what we get for our troubles," said the maiden. "A little green pat of butter. Why don't we kill it? You know what people will say." "I think it's rotten," said the fishwife, and checked for the root of a tail, counted fingers and toes. "It smells like dung." "That is dung you're smelling, you idiot. You're squatting in a cow patty pie." "It's sick. It's feeble. That's why the color. Lose it in the puddle. Drown the thing. She'll never know. She'll be out for hours in her ladylike faints." They giggled. They cradled the infant in the crook of their arms, passing it around to test it for weight and balance. To kill it was the kindest course of action. The question was how. Then the child yawned, and the fishwife absent-mindedly gave it a finger to nurse on, and the child bit the finger off at the second knuckle. It almost choked on the gush of blood. The digit popped out of its mouth into the mud like a bobbin. The women catapulted into action. The fishwife lunged to strangle the girl, and the crone and the maiden flared up in defense. The finger was dug out of the mire and shoved in an apron pocket, possibly to sew back onto the hand that had lost it. "It's a cock. She just realized she didn't have one," screeched the maiden, and fell on the ground laughing. "Oh, beware the stupid boy first tries to please himself with her. She'll snip his young sprout off for a souvenir." The midwives crawled back into the clock and dropped the thing at its mother's breast, afraid to consider mercy murder for fear of what else the baby might bite. "Maybe she'll chop the tit next. That'll bring her drowsy frailness around quick enough," the crone chuckled. "Though what a child, that sips blood even before its first suck of mother's milk." They left a pipkin of water nearby, and under cover of the next squall they went squelching away, to find their sons and husbands and brothers, and berate and beat them if they were available, or bury them if not. In the shadows, the infant stared overhead at the oiled regular teeth of time's clock. This is part of the story that you guys probably didn't know anything about. This world building is pretty dark. Just so you know, it's pretty dark. Maladies and remedies. For days, Melina couldn't bear to look at the thing. She held it, as a mother must. She waited for the groundwater of maternal affection to rise and overwhelm her. She did not weep. She chewed pinlobble leaves to float away from the disaster. It was a she. It was a her. Melina practiced conversions in her thinking when she was alone. The twitching, unhappy bundle was not male. It was not neutered. It was a female. It slept, looking like a heap of cabbage leaves washed and left to drain on the table. In a panic, Melina wrote to Colwyn Grounds to drag Nanny from her retirement. Frex went ahead in a carriage to collect Nanny from the way station at Stone Spar End. On the trip back, Nanny asked Frex what was wrong. "What is wrong?" he sighed, and was lost in thought. Nanny realized she had chosen her words poorly. Now Frex was distracted. He began to mumble in a general way about the nature of evil. A vacuum set up by the inexplicable absence of the unnamed god, and into which spiritual poison must rush. A vortex. "I mean, what is the state of the child?" retorted Nanny explosively. "It's not the universe, but a single child I need to hear about if I'm going to be of any help. Why does Melina call for me instead of for her mother? Why is there no letter for her grandfather? He's the eminent Throp, for goodness sakes. Melina can't have forgotten her duties so thoroughly, or is life out there in the country worse than we thought?" "It's worse than we thought," said Frex grimly. "The baby. You had better be prepared, Nanny, so you don't scream. The baby is damaged." "Damaged?" Nanny's grip on her valise tightened, and she looked out over the red-leaved pearl fruit trees by the side of the road. "Frex, tell me everything." It's a girl, said Frex. Damage indeed, said Nanny mockingly, but Frex was, as usual, missed the dig. Well, at least the family's title's preserved for another generation. Has she got all her limbs? Yes. Any more than she needs? No. Is she suckling? We can't let it. It has extraordinary teeth, Nanny. It has shark's teeth, or something like. Well, she won't be the first child to grow on a bottle or a rag instead of a tit. Don't worry about that. It's the wrong color, said Frex. What color is the wrong color? For a few moments, Frex could only shake his head. Nanny did not like him, and she would not like him, but she softened. Frex, it can't be that bad. There's always a way out. Tell Nanny. It's green, he finally said. Nanny, it's green as moss. She's green, you mean. It's a she, for heaven's sake. It's not for heaven's sake. Frex began to weep. Heaven is not improved by it, Nanny, and heaven does not approve. What are we to do? Hush. Nanny detested weeping men. It can't be as bad as all that. There isn't a sniff of low blood in Melina's veins. Whatever blight the child has will respond to Nanny's treatment. Trust Nanny. I trusted in the unnamed God, sobbed Frex. We don't always work at cross purposes, God and Nanny, said Nanny. She knew this was blasphemous, but she couldn't resist a jibe as long as Frex's resistance was down. But don't worry. I won't breathe a word to Melina's family. We'll sort this all out in a flash, and no one need know. The baby has a name? Elphaba, he said. After Saint Elphaba of the Waterfall? Yes. A fine old name. You'll use the common nickname, Fabula, I suppose. Who even knows if she'll live long enough to grow into a nickname? Frex sounded as if he'd hoped this would be the case. Interesting country. Are we in Wend Hardings yet? Nanny asked, to change the subject. But Frex had folded up inside, barely bothering to guide the horses onto the correct track. The country was filthy, depressed, peasant-ridden. Nanny began to wish she had not set out in her best traveling gown. Roadside robbers might expect to find gold on such a refined-looking older woman, and they would be right, for Nanny sported a golden garter, stolen years ago from her ladyship's boudoir. What a humiliation if the garter would turn up these years later on Nanny's well-turned, if aging, thigh. But Nanny's fears were unfounded, for the carriage arrived, without incident, in the yard of the minister's cottage. Let me see the baby first, said Nanny. It will be easier and fairer on Melina if I know what we're dealing with. And this wasn't hard to arrange, as Melina was out cold thanks to pinlobble leaves, while the baby in a basket on the table wailed softly. Nanny drew up a chair so she wouldn't hurt herself if she fainted dead away. Frex, put the basket on the floor where I can look into it. Frex obliged, and then went to return the horses and carriage to Buffy, who rarely needed them for mayoral duties, but loaned them out to earn a little political capital. The infant was wrapped in linens, Nanny saw, and the baby's mouth and ears were strapped with a sling. The nose looked like a knob of bad mushroom, poking up for air, and the eyes were open. Nanny leaned closer. The child couldn't be, 3 weeks old? Yet as Nanny moved from side to side, looking at the profile of the forehead from this angle and that, so as to judge the shape of the mind, the girl's eyes tracked her back and forth. They were brown and rich, the color of overturned earth, flecked with mica. There was a network of fragile red lines at each soft angle where the eyelids met, as if the girl had been bursting the blood threads from the exertion of watching and understanding. And the skin? Oh yes, the skin was green as sin. Not an ugly color, Nanny thought. Just not a human color. She reached out and let her finger drift across the baby's cheek. The infant flinched, and her backbone arched, and the wrapping, which was tucked securely around the child from neck to toe, split open like a husk. Nanny gritted her teeth, and she was determined not to be cowed. The baby had exposed herself, sternum to groin, and the skin on her chest was the same remarkable color. Have you even touched this child yet, you two? Murmured Nanny. She put her hand palm down on the child's heaving chest, her fingers covering the almost invisible baby nipples, then slid her hand down so she could check the apparatus below. The child was wet and soiled, but felt made according to the standard design. The skin was the same miracle of pliant smoothness that Malena had possessed as an infant. Come to Nanny, you horrid little thing, you. Nanny leaned to pick the baby up, mess and all. The baby swiveled to avoid the touch. Her head beat itself against the rush bottom of the basket. You've been dancing in the womb, I see, said Nanny. I wonder to whose music? Such well-developed muscles. No, you're not getting away from me. Come here, you little demon. Nanny doesn't care. Nanny likes you. She was lying through her teeth, but unlike Frex, she believed some lies were sanctioned by heaven. And she got her hands on Elphaba and settled her on her lap. There Nanny waited, crooning and every now and then looking away out the window to recover herself and keep from vomiting. She rubbed the baby's belly to calm the girl down, but there was no calming her down. Not yet, anyway. Malena propped herself up on her elbows in the late afternoon when Nanny brought a tray with tea and bread. I have made myself at home, said Nanny, and I've made friends with your tiny darling. Now come to your senses, sweetheart, and let me give you a kiss. Oh, Nanny, Malena allowed herself to be coddled. Thank you for coming. Have you seen the little monster? She's adorable, said Nanny. Don't lie, and don't be soft, said Malena. If you're going to help, you must be honest. If I'm going to help, you must be honest, said Nanny. We need not go into it now, but I will have to know everything, my sweet, so we can decide what's to be done. They sipped their tea, and because Elphaba had fallen asleep at last, it seemed for a few moments like the old days at Colwyn Grounds, when Malena would come home from afternoon walks with lithesome young gentry on the make, and boast of their masculine beauty to a Nanny who pretended she had not noticed. In fact, as the weeks went on, Nanny noticed quite a few disturbing things about the baby. For one thing, Nanny tried to remove the baby's bandages, but Elphaba seemed intent on biting her own hands off, and the teeth inside that pretty thin-lipped mouth were indeed monstrous. She would bite a hole through the basket if she were left unfettered. She went after her own shoulder and scraped it raw. She looked as if she were strangling. Can't a barber be had to pull the teeth out? Nanny asked. At least until the baby learns some self-control. You're out of your mind, Malena said. It will be all over the valley that the little marrow is green. We'll keep the jaw strapped up until we solve the skin problem. However in the world did her skin come green, Nanny wondered, stupidly, for Malena blanched and Frex reddened, and the baby held her breath as if trying to turn blue to please them all. Nanny had to slap her to make her breathe again. Nanny interviewed Frex out in the yard. After the double blow of the birth and his public embarrassment, he was not yet up to professional engagements and sat whittling praying beads out of oak, scoring and inscribing them with emblems of the namelessness of God. Nanny set Elphaba down inside. She had an unreasonable fear. Oh. Wait a second. There we go. Wonderful. She had an unreasonable fear of being overheard by this infant, and worse, of being understood, and Nanny sat scooping out a pumpkin for supper. I don't suppose, Frex, that you have green in your family background, she began, knowing full well that Malena's powerful grandfather would have confirmed such a predisposition before agreeing to let his granddaughter marry a Unionist minister. Of all the chances she had. Our family isn't about money or about earthly power, said Frex, taking no offense for once. But I'm descended in direct line from 6 ministers before me, father to son. We're as well regarded in spiritual circles as Malena's family is in parlors and at the court of Ozma. And no, there's no green anywhere. I've never heard of such a thing before in any family. Nanny nodded and said, well, all right, I was only asking. I know you're gooder than goblin martyrs. But, Frex said humbly. Nanny, I think I caused this thing to happen. My tongue slipped on the day of the birthday. I announced that the devil was coming. I meant the clock of the time dragon, but suppose those words unlocked room for the devil. The child is no devil, snapped Nanny. She's no angel either, she thought, but she kept it to herself. On the other hand, Frex continued, sounding more secure, she may have been cursed by Melina, accidentally, who took my remark the wrong way and wept about it. Maybe Melina opened up inside herself a window through which an unattached sprite entered and colored the child. On the very day she is to be born, said Nanny. That's a capable sprite. Is your goodness so exalted you attract the truly high-powered among the spirits of aberration? Frex shrugged. A few weeks earlier he would have nodded, but his confidence was shattered with his abject failure in rush margins. He did not dare suggest what he feared. The child's abnormality was a punishment for his failure to protect his flock from the pleasure faith. Well, Nanny asked practically, if through a curse the goods were damaged, then through what might the ill be overturned? An exorcism, said Frex. Are you empowered? If I'm successful at changing her, we'll know that I'm empowered, said Frex. But now that he had a goal, his spirits brightened. He would spend some days in fasting, rehearsing prayers, and collecting supplies for the arcane ritual. When he was off in the woods, and Elphaba napping, Nanny perched on the side of Melina's hard marriage mattress. Frex wonders if his prediction that the devil was coming caused a window in you to open, letting an imp pass through to spoil the baby, said Nanny. She was crocheting an edge of lace, clumsily. She had never excelled at piecework, but she liked handling the polished ivory crochet hook. I wonder if you opened another window? Melina, groggy from pinlobble leaves as usual, arched an eyebrow in confusion. Did you sleep with someone other than Frex? Nanny asked. Don't be mad, said Melina. I know you, honey, said Nanny. I'm not saying you're not a good wife, but when you had the boys buzzing around you in your parents' orchard, you changed your perfumed undergarments more than once a day. You were lusty and sneaky and good at it. I'm not looking down at you, but don't pretend to me that your appetites weren't healthy. Melina buried her face in the pillow. Oh, for those days, she wailed. It's not that I don't love Frex, but I hate being better than the local peasant idiots. Well, now this green child brings you down to their level. You ought to be pleased, said Nanny meanly. Nanny, I love Frex, but he leaves me so often. I would kill for some tinker to pass by and sell me more than a tin coffee pot. I would pay well for someone less godly and more imaginative. That's a question for the future, said Nanny sensibly. I'm asking you about the past, the recent past, since your marriage. But Melina's face was vague and blurry. She nodded, she shrugged, she rocked her head. The obvious theory is an elf, said Nanny. I wouldn't have sex with an elf, Melina shrieked. No more would I, said Nanny, but the green does give one pause. Are there elves in the neighborhood? There's a gaggle of them, tree elves, up over the hill someplace, but if possible they are more moronic than their fair citizens of Rush Margins. Really, Nanny, I've never even seen one, or only from a distance. The idea is repulsive. Elves giggle at everything. Do you know that? One of them falls out of an oak and smashes his skull like a rotten turnip, and they gather and giggle and then forget about him. It's insulting of you to even bring it up. Get used to it, if we don't find a way out of this quagmire. Well, the answer is no. Then someone else, someone handsome enough on the outside, but carrying a germ that maybe you caught. Melina looked shocked. She hadn't thought of her own health since Elphaba was born. Could she be at risk? The truth, said Nanny. We must know. The truth, said Melina distantly. Well, it is unknowable. What are you trying to say? I don't know the answer to your question. And Melina explained. Yes, The cottage was off the beaten track, and of course she never passed more than the curtest greetings with local farmers and fishermen and thickheads, but more travelers took to the hills and woods than you would credit. Often she had sat listless and lonely while Frex was off preaching, and she had found comfort in giving passers-by a simple meal and a buoyant conversation. And more? But on those boring days, Melina muttered, she had taken to chewing pinlopple leaves. When she would awake, because the sun was setting or Frex was there frowning or grinning at her, she remembered little. You mean you indulged in adultery, and you don't even have the benefit of a good, saucy memory about it? Nanny was scandalized. I don't know that I did, said Melina. I wouldn't choose to. I mean, not if I was thinking clearly. But I remember once a tinker with a funny accent gave me a draught of some heady brew of a green glass bottle. And I had rare, expansive dreams, Nanny, of the other world, cities of glass and smoke, noise and color. I tried to remember. So you could well have been raped by elves. Won't your grandfather be pleased to learn how Frex is taking care of you? Stop, cried Melina. Well, I don't know what's to be done. Nanny lost her temper at last. Everyone's being irresponsible. If you can't remember whether your marriage vows have been broken or not, there's not much good in acting like an offended saint. We can always drown the baby and start over. Just try drowning that thing, muttered Nanny. I pity the poor lake, asked to take her in. Later, Nanny went through Melina's small collection of medicines. Herbs, drops, roots, brandies, leaves. She was wondering, without much hope, if she could invent something that might cause the girl's skin to blanch. In the back of the chest, Nanny found the green glass bottle spoken of by Melina. The light was bad and her eyes weren't strong, but she could make out the words, Miracle Elixir, on a piece of paper pasted to the front. Though she had a native skill in healing, Nanny was unable to come up with a skin-changing potion. Bathing the child in cow's milk didn't make the skin white either, but the child would not allow herself to be lowered into a pail of lake water. She twisted like a cat in panic. Nanny kept on with the cow's milk. It left a horrid sour stink if she did not rub it off thoroughly with a cloth. Frex organized an exorcism. It involved candles and hymns. Nanny watched from a distance. The man was beady-eyed, perspiring with effort, even though the mornings were colder and colder. Elphaba slept in her binding cloth in the middle of the carpet, oblivious to the sacrament. Nothing happened. Frex fell, exhausted and spent, and cradled his green daughter within the crook of his arm, as if finally embracing the proof of some undisclosed sin. Melina's face hardened. There was only one thing left to try. Nanny gathered the courage to bring it up on the day she was to leave back for Colwyn grounds. We see that peasant treatments don't work, said Nanny, and spiritual intercession has failed. Do you have the courage to think about sorcery? Is there someone local who could magic the green venom out of the child? Frex was up and lashing out at Nanny, swinging his fists. Nanny fell backward off her stool, and Melina bobbed about her, shrieking. How dare you? Cried Frex. In this household, isn't this green girl insult enough? Sorcery is the refuge of the amoral. When it isn't out-and-out charlatanism, it is dangerously evil. Contracts with the demons. Nanny said, Ooh, preserve me, you fine, fine man. Don't you know enough to fight fire with fire? Nanny, enough, said Melina. Hitting a feeble old woman, said Nanny, hurt, who only tries to help. The next morning, Nanny packed her valise. There was nothing more that she could do, and she wasn't willing to live the rest of her life with a fanatical hermit and a ruined baby, even for the sake of Melina. Frex drove Nanny back to the inn at Stonespar End, for the coach and 4 to take her home. Nanny knew Melina might still think about killing the child, but somehow she doubted it. Nanny held her valise to her ample bosom, fearing bandits again. Inside her valise was hidden her gold garter. She could always claim it had been planted there without her knowledge, where it would have been hard to claim it had been planted on her leg in the same circumstances. She also had squirreled away the ivory crochet hook, 3 of Frex's prayer beads because she liked the carvings, and the pretty green glass bottle left behind by some itinerant salesman selling, apparently, dreams and passion and solemnance. She didn't know what she thought. Was Elphaba devil's spawn? Was she half-elf? Was she punishment for her father's failure as a preacher, or for her mother's sloppy morals and bad memory? Or was she merely a physical ailment, a blight like a misshapen apple or a 5-legged calf? Nanny knew her worldview was foggy and chaotic, pestered by demons, faith, and folk science. It didn't escape her attention, however, that both Melina and Frex had believed uncompromisingly that they would have a boy. Frex was the 7th son of a 7th son, and to add to that powerful equation, he was descended from 6 ministers in a row. Whatever child of either, or any, sex could dare follow in so auspicious a line. Perhaps, thought Nanny, little green Elphaba chose her own sex, and her own color. And to hell with her parents. All right. That is going to conclude our first reading of Wicked. Thank you guys so very much for joining me this evening. I hope you guys have enjoyed this so far. It probably is maybe not what you were expecting if you've never read this book before, or if you have seen the Broadway show. It's definitely a lighter take on this. I mean, look at how thick this book is. There's a lot happening in here. And obviously there's a lot that can't be conveyed in the show. And I haven't seen the movie yet. As a disclaimer, I haven't seen the movie yet, so I don't know how much of additional detail they're taking with this. I don't know if there's like side stories like in here that they're going to be expanding on. I don't know. But I do want to go see the movie soon, just to kind of get a reference for how compatible these two forms of media are. So, but yeah, I hope you guys have enjoyed this so far. Please join me again next week, Monday, same time, 8 to 9, in this case 9:15, 9:16, whatever. And we'll continue on with our reading of Wicked. So if you happen to be seeing this on YouTube, if you don't have TikTok, or if you've missed this reading, hi. If you're a new subscriber on my YouTube channel, hi. I have reached over 1,000 subscribers on YouTube, so now I can do lives as well on YouTube as well as TikTok. So thank you to everybody who has subscribed to my YouTube channel. And I hope you all have a fantastic week. If you have experienced snow in your area like I have, please be careful if you have to be out and about in it, because I have a feeling we're going to get some more later this week maybe. So yeah, with that being said, you guys have a fantastic night. Stay safe, stay hydrated, and I will see you next week. Bye.